My name is Suzanne Paul. I'm 30 years old, and if you'd asked me a year ago what love looked like, I would have described it like a quiet kind of loyalty. Showing up, paying attention, believing in someone, even when the world didn't. I didn't realize that kind of love can be weaponized. I met Caleb Morrison at an open mic night in the basement of a coffee shop that smelled like burnt espresso and wet coats. The crowd was small. Students, hopefuls, a few locals who liked feeling cultured without leaving their neighborhood. The kind of place where people clap too hard because they're not just applauding you. They're applauding the possibility that one day someone will clap for them too. Caleb was on the list right after a guy with a guitar and a girl who read a spoken word piece that was mostly just yelling at the ceiling. Then Caleb stepped up. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. He read his poem like he was letting the audience borrow something fragile. Dramatic pauses, a voice that dipped low at the ends of lines, hands that barely moved, like he didn't want to interrupt the words. And I'll admit it, I was impressed. After his set, I approached him with that polite, nervous bravery you only get when you genuinely want to connect with someone and you're afraid they'll make you feel foolish for trying. Your reading was really good, I told him. Caleb smiled, like he wasn't used to praise. He tucked his hair back, eyes bright, and said, "I've been writing for years. I'm finally brave enough to share." That sentence should have come with a warning label. We grabbed coffee the next week, then dinner. Then it became this easy routine. Texts that never stopped. Late night drives. Laughing in parking lots like we were teenagers again. Caleb talked about writing the way some people talk about religion. The devotion. The reverence. The way he made it sound like he was chosen for something. He worked part-time at a print shop and made about $30,000 a year. I worked operations at a logistics company. Steady pay, benefits, real stability. I never minded the imbalance. In fact, I told myself it was romantic. I'm the grounded one, I thought. He's the dreamer. I didn't understand that dreamers can be dangerous when they decide the world owes them applause. Caleb always had notebooks. On the coffee table, on the kitchen counter, tossed in the passenger seat of his car, like they were extensions of his body. But I never, not once, saw him actually write. If I asked what he was working on, he'd say something vague. A new collection. A longer piece. Something personal. And if I asked to read it, "It's not ready," he'd say too quickly. This went on for 3 years. 3 years of him talking about poems like they existed in a sacred place I wasn't allowed to enter. 3 years of notebooks that were always private. 3 years of him acting like my curiosity was an invasion. Sometimes I'd reach for one on the couch without thinking, and he'd snatch it back like I'd grabbed his throat. "Suzanne, no," he'd say, sharp enough to make me flinch. Then softer, like he realized he'd shown too much. It's personal. I'm not ready to share." I let it go because I loved him, or because I wanted to believe the version of him I'd built in my head. We dated for 3 years before he proposed. Small ring, quiet night. He lit candles in our living room, got down on one knee, and looked up at me like I was the answer to everything. I said yes. We didn't do a huge wedding, just a small ceremony, close friends, a rented space with twinkle lights and cheap champagne. I thought it would feel intimate. Instead, it felt like an interview. Because that's when I truly met his family. His mother, Linda, was the type of woman who didn't smile with her eyes. She hugged me like she was checking the quality of the fabric on my coat. Within 5 minutes of meeting her, she asked, "So what did that car of yours run you?" Not hello, not welcome, not we're happy to finally meet you. Straight to money. I blinked, convinced I'd misheard. "I'm sorry?" She repeated it, louder, like I was the one being rude. "Your car, it's nice. How much?" Caleb laughed like it was charming. Like she was quirky. "Mom, stop," he said, but he didn't mean it. His older sister Rachel was worse because she wrapped cruelty in sweetness. When I mentioned we were taking a long weekend trip for our honeymoon instead of somewhere exotic, she tilted her head and said, "That's cute." Cute, like we were kids playing house. Then she smiled at Caleb and said, "I guess not everyone has big goals." He laughed. I laughed too, because sometimes you laugh when you're trying not to feel the sting. Caleb's younger brother, Derek, made jokes all night about how Caleb had hit the jackpot marrying someone responsible. Everyone chuckled like it was harmless. But I noticed something. They didn't talk to Caleb like they respected him, and they didn't talk to me like they respected me either. They talked to me like I was a resource. At the reception, Linda gave a toast that made my stomach tighten. She talked about Caleb finally finding security. Not love, not partnership, security. like I was a bank account with legs. Rachel cornered me during cocktail hour. So, ballpark, she said, swirling her drink. What do you make? Like 70, 80? My face burned. I glanced around, hoping Caleb would appear. He was across the room, laughing with Derek, oblivious. I'm not really comfortable discussing that, I said. Rachel's smile didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. Oh, okay. I'd just like to know what people's plans are. Plans. People. Like my life was a spreadsheet she could sort and filter. I went home that night with my new husband and told myself I was being sensitive, that every family had their weird quirks, that it would settle once they got to know me. It didn't. 8 months into marriage, Caleb came home with that look on his face, the one he used when he wanted something big. He held a folder like it was a golden ticket. I did it, he said, breathless. I finished the collection. I stared at him. You finished? Over 100 poems, he said. This is it, Suzanne, my big break. He told me about a hybrid press, editing, design, printing, marketing, distribution. He talked fast, like if he slowed down the logic might fall apart. Then he slid a page across the table. The cost was printed in bold. $17,000. I felt my brain stall like a computer buffering. That's a lot, I managed. Caleb's eyes went wide and pleading. It's an investment, not vanity publishing. This press gets books into stores, sets up readings, handles PR. They take writers seriously. He leaned forward, voice softer. I need you to believe in me. And here's the truth. I wanted to. I wanted so badly to be the kind of woman who didn't flinch at a dream, the kind of partner who didn't measure love in dollars. So even though my gut twisted, even though something inside me whispered, this feels wrong, I told myself that supporting him was what you did in a marriage. I transferred the money in 2 payments. I watched my savings drop like it had been shot. Caleb kissed my forehead and said, You won't regret this. He said it like a promise. Now I know it was a prophecy. For a few months after I transferred the money, Caleb became a man on a mission. He spent hours on the phone with his editor, pacing the apartment like a CEO negotiating a merger. He obsessed over cover designs, fonts, paper textures, argued passionately about whether the title should be italicized or not, like he was commissioning the Sistine Chapel instead of a poetry book that, realistically, maybe a few dozen people would read. Drafts appeared on his dining table. Sticky notes multiplied. Highlighters stained his fingers. He stayed up late, woke up early, muttering lines under his breath as if they were spells. And for the first time in years, I felt hopeful. Maybe this is it, I thought. Maybe the secrecy was just part of the process. Maybe I really did help him become who he was meant to be. The book launched 6 months later. Fractured Light by Caleb Morrison. The cover was actually nice. Soft watercolor tones, clean typography. His name centered, confident. We hosted a small launch event at a local bookstore. His family showed up, a few friends, a handful of people from the press. Caleb stood at the podium reading poems, voice steady, posture proud. He signed copies, posed for photos, smiled like someone who had finally been validated. I stood off to the side, watching him, feeling something dangerously close to pride. I had helped make this happen. I even bought extra copies for my coworkers, people who smiled politely and thanked me, books they would probably never open. I didn't care. I wanted him to feel supported. That feeling lasted about 2 weeks, because the moment Caleb saw his book in print, something inside him shifted. Not overnight, but unmistakably. He started introducing himself as a published author everywhere. And I don't mean at readings, I mean everywhere. At the grocery store checkout, yeah, I'm a published author. At the bank, I actually write poetry. Published, you know. At Starbucks, to a barista who clearly did not care, I just published a book. One time at the DMV, I watched him casually mention it 3 times to the poor guy renewing his license. The man nodded politely like he was listening to a weather report. Caleb didn't notice or didn't care. He updated his email signature at the print shop to Caleb Morrison, published author, print technician. I cringed when I saw it. Then came the spending. Designer clothes started appearing in our closet, brands I'd never seen him even glance at before. Nordstrom bags, shoes that cost more than our grocery budget, a leather jacket that had to be close to $1,000. Not 1, not 2, but multiple expensive purchases within weeks. I finally said something one night when I saw another shopping bag on the counter. Caleb, we just spent $17,000, I said carefully. Maybe we should slow down a bit. He waved his hand at me without even looking up from his phone. You're being financially controlling, he said. I blinked. What? I deserve to celebrate my success, he replied, annoyed. This book is an investment. It'll pay for itself. Except it wasn't. I checked the Amazon rankings out of curiosity. The book was sitting somewhere around 847,000. There were maybe 30 reviews, most of them from his family. Generic comments like, so proud, and amazing work, the kind you write when you haven't actually read the book. Bookstore readings stopped after the first two. The press stopped replying to his emails about marketing, because there was nothing to market. The book was dead on arrival. Caleb refused to accept that. He blamed the press, blamed bookstores, blamed readers for being too stupid to appreciate real poetry. Never once did he consider that maybe the book just wasn't that good. And that's when the comments about me started. At first, they were subtle. He'd mentioned how Rachel's husband made six figures at a tech firm, how his brother Derek's girlfriend worked in finance and traveled internationally. Then he'd sigh and look at me like I'd disappointed him personally. Must be nice, he'd say, to have a partner with real ambition. The first time I thought I misheard him. The second time I asked what he meant. Oh, nothing, he said quickly. I'm just thinking out loud. I reminded him that my boring job paid the mortgage, paid the bills, paid for his $17,000 book. He rolled his eyes and walked away like I was embarrassing him. Then he started complaining about our house. It was a 3-bedroom place in a good neighborhood. Not flashy, but comfortable. A home I'd bought before we were married. Suddenly it was too small. Dated. Not inspiring. His mother agreed. Said Rachel had just upgraded to a 4-bedroom with a pool. Caleb sighed dramatically. Some people really know how to provide. I swallowed my response and told myself marriages had rough patches. Publicly, it got worse. When we were out with friends, he'd joke about me being uneducated, about how I was content with a small life while he dreamed bigger things. People laughed awkwardly. I stood there, smiling, wondering when my husband had become a stranger. Caleb stopped coming home on time. Family dinners turned into multiple nights a week. He'd come back smelling like wine, talking about how Rachel's life was goals, how Derek's girlfriend was living the dream. This wasn't a phase. This was who he'd always been. He'd just needed my money to feel confident enough to show it. 3 months into this slow erosion, his mother invited us to Sunday dinner. I should have said no. I should have stayed home. But I went, because I was still trying to save something that had already rotted. That night would change everything. Sunday dinner at Linda's house was one of those rituals that came with invisible rules. You showed up on time. You complimented the food. You ignored the subtle digs and smiled through them like they were harmless jokes. I brought a bottle of wine. Caleb walked in like he owned the place. Dinner started normally enough. Linda's pot roast was dry, somehow both bland and over-seasoned at the same time. Rachel and her husband arrived late, keys to their luxury SUV tossed casually on the counter where everyone could see them. Derek brought his girlfriend, who spent 10 uninterrupted minutes talking about her recent trip to Barcelona. Caleb soaked it all in. I mostly stayed quiet. After dinner, Linda asked me to grab dessert plates from the kitchen. I welcomed the excuse to step away. I needed air, space to breathe without being compared, evaluated, or measured. The kitchen had a half wall that opened into the dining room. From where I stood, I could hear everything clearly. That's when I heard my husband say my name. I don't know how much longer I can do this, Caleb said, his voice low and irritated. She's just so boring. I froze. Well, you married her, Rachel replied. I could hear the smirk in her voice. I know, Caleb sighed. I thought she'd level up, get more ambitious. But no, same job, same routine, same everything. It's suffocating. At least she's stable, Linda said. There was a pause. My hands tightened around the plates. Rachel laughed. Oh my God, Caleb. It's true, he continued, almost relieved to finally say it. Look at you, Rachel. Your husband's a real man. 6 figures. Actual vacations. I should have waited. Instead, I settled. Derek chimed in. You could always ride it out. You're young, published author now. Caleb chuckled. Exactly. I'll stay until something better comes along. She's too predictable to notice. I stood there, heart pounding, listening to my husband plan my replacement like a business upgrade. When I walked back in, they all fell silent. Caleb kissed my cheek, smiled, told me he loved me. I smiled back. That night, something inside me went cold. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. I watched. I started paying attention. The money was the first thing that didn't add up. Caleb made $30,000 a year, but somehow had designer bags, new clothes every week, expensive dinners, constant spending. I checked our joint account. Normal. Then I checked my personal savings. Withdrawals. Small at first, then bigger. All cash. All taken when I was at work. 7,000. 9 months. I felt sick. Then I found his laptop. His emails were still logged in. Folders, bookmarks, documents. Side-by-side comparisons. Another poet's work. Notes in the margins. Change wording to avoid detection. That's when I knew. I wasn't married to an artist. I was married to a thief. And I was done being quiet. Once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. After that night at Linda's house, I moved through my days like an actress who had finally been given the full script. Every smile Caleb gave me felt rehearsed. Every kiss felt transactional. I stopped asking questions, not because I didn't care, but because I was listening. I started with the money. At first, I hoped I'd made a mistake, a transfer I'd forgotten, an automatic payment gone wrong. I sat on the couch with my laptop open, scrolling through my savings account history, telling myself not to panic. Then I saw the pattern. Cash withdrawals. Always cash. Always from ATMs nowhere near our neighborhood. Always on weekdays. Always during hours when I was in meetings, conferences, or out of town for work. 9 months. The amount started small. $100, $200. Easy to miss. Then $300. $500. Toward the end, a clean $1,000 at a time. When I added it all up, my hands started shaking. $7,000. $7,000 stolen from an account Caleb wasn't supposed to have access to. An account I'd had since college. An account explicitly protected by the prenup he insisted on signing. I felt something inside me snap, not in anger, but in clarity. This wasn't betrayal anymore. This was theft. I didn't say a word to him. I acted normal. I laughed when he laughed. I nodded when he talked about book ideas that made my skin crawl. A few nights later, I couldn't find my laptop charger. I searched the apartment until I remembered Caleb had borrowed my laptop the previous week, claimed his was running slow. I found it in his creative space, the spare bedroom I wasn't supposed to enter without permission. The screen was still on. His email was still logged in. I stood there for a long moment, hand hovering over the mouse, heart pounding, not with guilt, but with a quiet sense of inevitability. I opened the folders. At first, it was just emails from the press. Editing notes, contracts, nothing alarming. Then I saw a folder labeled Research. Inside were dozens of bookmarked poetry blogs. One name appeared over and over again. A woman named Madison Shaw. I clicked. Her poems were time-stamped from 3 to 5 years ago. Then I found another document. Poem modifications private. Side-by-side columns. Left, Madison Shaw's poems. Right, Caleb's. Minor changes. Swapped words. Altered endings. Margin notes in his own handwriting. Change this word to avoid detection. Rephrase metaphor. Too similar. Keep structure. Adjust imagery. I felt physically ill. This wasn't inspiration. This wasn't coincidence. It was methodical, calculated. I took screenshots of everything. The documents, the bookmarks, the emails, the bank statements. I emailed copies to myself, uploaded backups to the cloud, and stored them on a flash drive I hid in my work bag. When Caleb came home that night, he talked excitedly about meeting Rachel for lunch, about new boots he'd bought, about nothing important. I smiled. I listened. Inside, I was already dismantling his life. The next morning, I took a personal day. The first call I made was to Madison Shaw. I explained everything, attached the evidence. I expected skepticism, anger, silence. Instead, she replied within 2 hours. She'd suspected it months ago, had noticed similarities, but she didn't have proof or money for lawyers. Now she had both. We got on a call that afternoon. Madison was nothing like Caleb. She taught high school English, wrote poetry because she loved it. No ego, no performance, just quiet passion. I can't afford a legal fight, she said carefully. I can, I replied. I'll front the costs. We split any settlement, but more importantly, we expose him. There was a long pause. Then she said, okay. I hired an intellectual property lawyer the same day, paid the retainer without flinching. When he reviewed the documents, his expression shifted from professional to impressed. This is one of the clearest plagiarism cases I've seen, he said. Then I showed him the bank statements. He leaned back in his chair. This changes things, he said slowly. This isn't just copyright infringement. This is fraud, theft, financial abuse. I nodded. Good. The cease and desist went out 2 days later. Copies sent to the press. Copies sent directly to Caleb, with every piece of evidence attached. Plagiarism. Side-by-side comparisons. Theft documentation. I didn't warn him. I didn't prepare him. I let the ground drop out from under his feet. The press responded within 48 hours. They pulled Fractured Light from all distribution, issued a public statement disavowing the work. Online listings vanished overnight. They cut him loose so fast it was almost impressive. Caleb called me at work, hysterical. They're saying I plagiarized, he said, voice cracking. They pulled the book. This is insane. That's weird, I said calmly. Where would they get that idea? I don't know, he cried. Can you come home? I need your help. I'm slammed today, I replied. We'll talk tonight. I didn't go home. I met with a divorce lawyer instead. We'd been married less than 2 years. The prenup, again, his idea, was airtight. Assets acquired before marriage stayed separate. The house was mine. My savings were mine. Retirement accounts untouched. He'd walk away with almost nothing. And with the theft, the lawyer added, you could pursue criminal charges if you wanted. Not yet, I said. Let's see how he handles the truth. I asked Caleb to meet me at a coffee shop the next morning. Public, neutral, controlled. He agreed instantly. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. No makeup, no confidence, sweatpants, hair unwashed. His hands shook as he sat down. He launched into excuses immediately. Madison was lying. The press overreacted. It was all a misunderstanding. I let him talk. Then I slid the folder across the table, 2 inches thick. Receipts, comparisons, bank statements. I watched his face drain of color as he flipped through it. These are Madison Shaw's poems, I said evenly, published years before yours. These are your versions. These are your notes. And this, I tapped the bank statements, is theft. He tried to accuse me of invading his privacy. I shut that down. It was my laptop, I said, and you left yourself logged in. He tried the subconscious influence excuse, creative overlap, accident. I didn't raise my voice. I told him the lawsuit was already filed. Damages estimated between $30,000 and $40,000. His book gone, his reputation destroyed. Then I slid over the divorce papers. 30 days to vacate my house. He started begging. I didn't feel anything, and I hadn't even told him the worst part yet. Caleb's hands were shaking when he reached the last page of the divorce papers. Where am I supposed to go? He whispered. Suzanne, we can fix this. Counseling. I'll do anything. I leaned back in my chair and studied him. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, but with the detached clarity you get when someone finally shows you exactly who they are. Anything? I asked quietly. His eyes flickered. Yes. Do you remember your mother's Sunday dinner? I said. The color drained from his face so fast it was almost impressive. I told him everything. How I'd been in the kitchen holding dessert plates, how I'd heard him call me boring, disgusting, beneath him, how he'd joked about showering after touching me, how he'd openly planned to use me financially until something better came along. I watched his chest tighten as I repeated his words back to him, calmly, precisely, without emotion. He tried to interrupt me, blame the wine, said he didn't mean it, said his family poisoned his thinking. I didn't stop. I reminded him that his mother saw me standing there and said nothing, that Rachel laughed, that Derek agreed, that they'd all watched me fund his fake career while treating me like an inconvenience with a paycheck. You didn't just betray me, I said. You stole from me. You humiliated me. And you assumed I was too boring to ever fight back. He started crying then, real tears, not the performative kind he usually used. He reached for my hand. I pulled away. You told them I disgusted you, I said. So don't touch me. That's when I slid the final document across the table. The bank statements. Every cash withdrawal. Every date. Every ATM location. 9 months. $7,000. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. You accessed an account you weren't authorized to use, I continued. That's theft, fraud, potential felony charges. His knees visibly weakened. He gripped the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping him upright. I could press charges, I said evenly. I could have police waiting for you at your mother's house tonight. The cafe had gone quiet around us. People were staring. I didn't care. But I'm not going to, I added. His head snapped up, eyes full of desperate hope. This? I gestured vaguely between us. The lawsuit, the divorce, your book being erased. Everyone knowing you're a plagiarist and a thief? That's enough. I stood, gathering my things. Every time someone Googles your name, this will come up. Every job application, every date, every family dinner. You'll live with it forever. I walked out without looking back. The fallout was fast and ugly. Caleb called his mother 17 times the first day. Rachel 8 times. Derek 5. I watched the call logs rack up before I canceled our shared phone plan that evening. Linda left me a voicemail the next day, accused me of being cruel, vindictive, heartless, talked about forgiveness and family values. I deleted it halfway through. The divorce finalized exactly 30 days later. Caleb signed because he couldn't afford a lawyer. He moved in with a friend, got kicked out 3 weeks later, and eventually ended up back at his mother's house, the same one where they'd spent years telling me I wasn't good enough. The plagiarism lawsuit settled 2 months later. Madison won. Caleb had to pay $32,000 in damages and legal fees. He set up a payment plan he'd be paying off for years. After lawyers took their cut and Madison and I split the remainder, I recovered about $11,000. Not all of it, but enough. Madison sent me a photo of her check with a message. Using this to publish my real work. Thank you for believing me. Her poetry was beautiful, quiet, honest. Nothing like his. For a while, life was peaceful. I got promoted, started dating again, reclaimed parts of myself I didn't realize I'd lost. Then, one Monday night, 3 months later, Caleb showed up at my door. I had friends over. Pizza, beer, laughter, real joy. He stood on my porch dressed like a regret montage. Makeup, hair done, holding a folded piece of paper. He said he'd written me something. I didn't let him finish reading. When he read 3 lines of painfully bad poetry about broken wings and lighthouses, my friends burst out laughing. I didn't join them. I just looked at him and said, "That's what happens when you can't steal someone else's words." He cried. I closed the door. And that was it. No revenge fantasies, no screaming matches, no dramatic breakdowns.